Okay, as we get started and we're learning about running records, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the markings that you would typically do. For a running record, you want to try to make sure that you use the same markings each time, especially in a school if you're like a reading specialist. If you're doing markings like everybody else, if you give a copy to a teacher, they would then understand what they are meaning. So, because a lot of times, as in the example of the running record, you don't necessarily have the words on the page, and so this just helps make it so it's easier to understand what you mean with that. So if the word is read accurately, you just usually put a check. Some people just put a dot, but usually a check. If the child substitutes a word, so if the example was the word want, you just draw a line, and it's really important to write the word that was in the book and then write what the child says. I always, if they're reading faster, I need to do it, I write what the word they said was, because I can always borrow the book and go back and count the words and get the word that I needed for that. So this is the word they said, and that's the word that was in the book. So that's just a substitution that they substituted it. Now, if they reread something, you just draw a line and put an R. So this is where they stopped. So if I was rereading more than once, I would just draw a line back and around to where they started. Now, when they're self-correcting and they're doing that, we really do want to see a lot of rereads. That helps them that they're going back to really get the meaning. If they reread it more than once, we do the same thing around the whole phrase or sentence that they reread, and then we just put how many times. If they do it twice, you can do that there. If they're reading and they miss a word, sometimes they may skip a word. If there's the word very in there and they missed it, you just draw a line over that. If for some reason they added a word, you just kind of write if they missed or they added the word little, you would just write the caret and add the word little. If they were reading the went and the want, you would have put went over want. And if they're like, oh, that doesn't make sense, you would just put a self-correct. And that's just FC. If there was an intervention, you just put, if the teacher told, you just put a T. If the child asks, let me move the camera, thank you for, you would put a TA, just so you can identify if there's long pauses and you keep prompting them, well, what do you hear? What things there? Sometimes you do really have to tell them a word, but you also want to know if they're stopping and asking a lot. Sometimes they'll look at you because that's a skill mechanism. If they don't know, they just ask, they don't attempt. So it's data points that we know. And if they're sounding it out, you want to mark and see what they're sounding out. So if we had the word child and they start with k, h, I, old. And then they may notice that they do ch, ill, and then just short, ild, and then maybe they get it. So then you can put a check. You're just kind of chunking so you know what they're doing. Because if they're doing short I's and not long I's, then that tells you information. So I hope these are very useful. They're kind of basic with it, but just remember, you're just kind of going through and trying to code it so that later when you might not have the book in front of you, you can still know what it is and what you're seeing with that.